November 9, 1987, 11:23 p.m. The Ritz, New York City. The exclusive after-party for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony was winding down when 42-year-old Eric Clapton, widely regarded as one of the greatest guitar players who ever lived, noticed 29-year-old Prince Rogers Nelson sitting quietly in a corner booth. Clapton, who had just been inducted into the Hall of Fame for the second time, had been drinking steadily and was feeling philosophical about guitar playing and musical legacy. "You know," Clapton announced to the room of industry legends, "everyone keeps talking about how this Prince fellow can play everything. But I've never heard him play serious guitar, real blues, real rock, not that pop stuff with synthesizers." The challenge hung in the air like smoke as Prince looked up with that enigmatic smile. What happened in the next 5 minutes didn't just humble one of rock's most revered guitarists. It redefined what everyone in that room understood about the difference between being a great guitarist and being a musical force of nature. If you believe that true mastery reveals itself when someone steps outside their comfort zone and proves they can dominate any territory they choose to enter, please subscribe to witness the moment when a pop star reminded a guitar god that some musicians don't have limitations. They have choices about which genius to display. Eric Clapton in 1987 was at the absolute pinnacle of guitar respectability. His career had spanned over 2 decades, from his early days with the Yardbirds and Cream through his solo work that had established him as Slowhand, the guitarist's guitarist. At 42, Clapton had survived the deaths of close friends, battled personal demons, and emerged as both a technical master and an emotional storyteller through his instrument. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony had been a celebration of Clapton's legacy. He had already been inducted in 1992 as part of the Yardbirds, and tonight's induction as a solo artist confirmed his status as one of rock's essential figures. The ceremony had featured tributes from fellow guitarists, testimonials about his influence, and performances that showcased why Clapton was considered untouchable in the world of blues-based rock guitar. Prince, at 29, was experiencing his own peak of creative and commercial success. Sino, The Times, had been released earlier that year to massive critical acclaim, establishing Prince as not just a pop star but a serious artist who could work across multiple genres with equal facility. But in the guitar world, Prince was still seen primarily as a multi-instrumentalist who happened to play guitar, not as someone who belonged in conversations with specialists like Clapton. The after-party at the Ritz was exclusive even by music industry standards. Only inductees, their guests, and select industry figures were invited to the intimate venue where rock legends could celebrate away from public scrutiny. The room included guitar heroes like Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, and Keith Richards, players who had defined what electric guitar could accomplish. Prince had attended the ceremony as a guest and observer, not as an inductee. His presence was noted but not celebrated. He was respected as an artist, but wasn't yet seen as belonging to the same conversation as the evening's honorees. Prince seemed comfortable with this positioning, observing the proceedings with his characteristic quiet intensity. As the evening progressed and alcohol flowed freely, conversations became more philosophical and challenging. Musicians who rarely had the opportunity to interact outside of business contexts found themselves debating artistic approaches, influences, and the nature of musical mastery. Clapton, who had been holding court with several other guitarists, noticed Prince sitting alone and felt moved to address what he saw as an interesting musical phenomenon. In Clapton's mind, Prince represented the new generation of artists who used technology and studio techniques to create impressive sounds, without necessarily possessing the deep instrumental knowledge that came from years of focused practice on a single instrument. "You know," Clapton said, his voice carrying across the small venue, "everyone keeps talking about how this Prince fellow can play everything, piano, drums, bass, guitar, but I've never heard him play serious guitar. Real blues, real rock, not that pop stuff with synthesizers and drum machines." The comment wasn't necessarily hostile, but it carried the implicit challenge that separated traditional rock musicians from contemporary pop artists. Clapton was essentially questioning whether Prince's guitar abilities could stand up to scrutiny from specialists who had devoted their entire careers to mastering the instrument. Other guitarists in the room turned their attention to Prince, curious about how he would respond to what amounted to a public questioning of his credentials. Jeff Beck looked interested, Jimmy Page raised an eyebrow, and Keith Richards paused mid-conversation to see what would develop. Prince looked up from his booth, his expression calm and unreadable. "Eric, I have a lot of respect for what you've accomplished. You're one of the reasons I started taking guitar seriously." "Well then," Clapton replied, emboldened by the response and the attention from his peers, "why don't you show us what you learned? There's a guitar right over there." He pointed to a Fender Stratocaster that had been used during the evening's performances. The challenge was now explicit and public. Everyone in the room understood that they were about to witness either a gracious decline or an attempt by a pop star to prove he belonged in the company of rock's guitar aristocracy. Prince stood up slowly, walked to the guitar, and picked it up with the familiar ease of someone who had been playing for years. But instead of immediately beginning to play, he looked at Clapton with genuine curiosity. "What would you like to hear, Eric? Blues? Rock? Something specific?" Clapton, feeling confident in his home territory, made a suggestion that he was certain would reveal the limitations of Prince's guitar knowledge. "How about some Muddy Waters, Hoochie Coochie Man? Real Chicago blues. Let's see if you understand where this music comes from." Before we reveal how Prince responded to being challenged to play one of the most fundamental songs in electric blues history, let me ask you, have you ever watched someone excel in a field you thought was your specialty? Have you seen mastery emerge from unexpected places? Share your thoughts in the comments, because what happened next became a masterclass in the difference between technical skill and musical transcendence. Prince plugged in the Stratocaster and adjusted the amplifier settings with the quick efficiency of someone who understood the relationship between guitar, amp, and room acoustics. His movements were economical and purposeful, suggesting familiarity with equipment rather than the hesitant adjustments of someone playing unfamiliar gear. "Hoochie Coochie Man," Prince said quietly, as if confirming the selection to himself. He began with the classic opening riff, but immediately everyone in the room could tell that something was different. Prince wasn't just playing the notes. He was inhabiting the song with a depth of understanding that suggested intimate familiarity with both Muddy Waters' original version and the countless interpretations that had followed. But after establishing that he knew the song's basic structure, Prince began to transform it. He incorporated bending techniques that went beyond standard blues vocabulary, added harmonic complexity that elevated the simple chord progression, and demonstrated a rhythmic sophistication that made the familiar song sound newly discovered. Clapton watched with growing amazement as Prince revealed not just competence, but mastery. This wasn't someone who had learned to play guitar as a secondary instrument. This was someone who understood the guitar deeply enough to reinterpret foundational blues material with authority and originality. But Prince wasn't finished. Without pausing, he transitioned from Hoochie Coochie Man into a lightning-fast exploration of different guitar styles. He played classical passages with perfect fingering technique, moved into jazz chord progressions that demonstrated sophisticated harmonic knowledge, shifted into rock riffs that showed power and precision, and concluded with funk rhythms that proved his ability to make the guitar percussive as well as melodic. The room had gone completely silent. These were some of the world's most accomplished guitarists, and they were witnessing someone demonstrate mastery across styles and techniques that most specialists spent decades trying to perfect individually. When Prince finally stopped playing, the silence lasted for nearly 10 seconds. Then Jeff Beck started clapping slowly, followed by Jimmy Page, then Keith Richards, and finally the entire room erupted in applause. But the most significant response came from Eric Clapton himself. Clapton walked over to Prince, his expression showing a mixture of amazement, respect, and something approaching humility. "Prince," Clapton said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I owe you an apology. I thought I was challenging a pop star to prove he could play guitar. Instead, I just discovered that you're operating on a level that I'm still trying to reach." Prince, characteristically gracious, extended his hand to Clapton. "Eric, everything I know about making a guitar sing, I learned from listening to what you and the other players in this room created. Tonight wasn't about proving anything, it was about honoring what you taught me." But Clapton wasn't finished. In a moment that would become legendary among the musicians present, he made a request that stunned everyone. "Prince, Would you be willing to show me how you did that thing in the middle section? That harmonic technique? I've never heard anything like it." The question represented a complete reversal of the evening's power dynamic. One of the world's most respected guitarists was asking a, quote, pop star for instruction on guitar technique. Prince smiled and picked up the guitar again. For the next 20 minutes, he patiently demonstrated various techniques to Clapton and the other guitarists present, explaining his approach to the instrument with the generosity of a teacher who understood that knowledge was meant to be shared. Jeff Beck later described the evening as the night we all learned that we'd been thinking too small about what a guitar could do. Jimmy Page called it a masterclass in musical humility. Both Prince's willingness to share knowledge and Eric's willingness to learn from someone he'd underestimated. The impact of that evening extended far beyond the immediate group of witnesses. Word of Prince's guitar demonstration spread quickly through rock music circles, fundamentally changing how other musicians viewed his abilities. He was no longer seen as a pop artist who happened to play multiple instruments. He was recognized as a master of each instrument he chose to play. For Eric Clapton, the encounter was both humbling and inspiring. In interviews over the following months, he frequently mentioned Prince as one of the most impressive guitarists he'd ever encountered. "I learned something important that night," Clapton told Guitar Player magazine in 1988. "I thought mastery meant perfecting one approach to the guitar. Prince showed me that real mastery means understanding the guitar so completely that you can make it speak any language you choose. He doesn't play guitar like a guitarist. He plays guitar like music itself." The relationship between Clapton and Prince evolved significantly after that evening. They began corresponding about music and techniques, with Clapton often seeking Prince's input on projects that required genre-crossing approaches. When Prince died in 2016, Eric Clapton performed at the memorial concert in Minneapolis. His tribute included a guitar solo that incorporated techniques Prince had taught him nearly 30 years earlier. That night at the Ritz, Clapton told the memorial audience, "Prince taught me that the best musicians are those who never stop learning. He could have embarrassed me for my presumption. Instead, he treated my challenge as an opportunity to share knowledge. That's not just guitar mastery, that's human mastery." The Fender Stratocaster that Prince played that evening was later acquired by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where it's displayed with a plaque reading, "The instrument that proved mastery has no boundaries." Musicians who witnessed Prince's performance that night often describe it as a turning point in their understanding of what cross-genre mastery could look like. Prince hadn't just played guitar well, he had demonstrated that true musical genius can dominate any territory it chooses to explore. Today, the story of Prince's guitar demonstration at the Ritz is taught in music schools as an example of how artistic boundaries are often more limiting than artistic capabilities. Students learn about the difference between specialization and mastery, and about the importance of remaining open to unexpected sources of knowledge and inspiration. Prince Rogers Nelson proved that evening that when someone masters music itself, they don't just play instruments, they make instruments submit to musical will. He showed that the greatest artists are those who understand that technique serves vision, not the other way around. A pop star accepted a guitar god's challenge and reminded everyone present that some musicians don't have limitations. They have choices about which aspect of their genius to reveal. Because true mastery isn't about proving you're the best at one thing. It's about demonstrating that excellence has no boundaries when you understand music at its deepest level. If this story reminds you that the greatest learning often comes from the most unexpected teachers, and that true masters are those who remain humble enough to keep discovering new dimensions of their art, please subscribe to keep these stories alive. Because the world needs more examples of how genius, when expressed with generosity, elevates everyone who witnesses it.